April 3h, 1942 Detroit, Michigan. The factory floor smells of oil, hot steel, and cigarette smoke. Sparks shower off the welding tables like fireflies. Amid the din of hammers and stamping presses, a man in a grease-stained apron hunches over a crude metal frame, muttering to himself. His name is George Hyde, a German-born machinist turned American designer. To the foreman walking past, he looks like any other factory worker except for the pile of twisted prototypes scattered around him. Hyde's at it again, one laughs, building his Franken gun. Hyde doesn't look up. He grips his torch tighter, squinting at the dull grey sheet metal clamped to his table. Frankenstein works, he mutters. It just isn't pretty. The war is raging overseas. In Washington, the U.S. Army Ordnance Department is desperate for new weapons. The Thompson submachine gun, the pride of American infantry, is too slow and expensive to produce a craftsman's weapon for an industrial war. It takes 150 man-hours to machine and polish every part. Hyde knows this can't continue. You can't fight a modern war with a gun that needs a jeweler, he tells his assistant, tossing aside a Thompson frame. On his workbench sits something entirely different, ugly, blocky, almost laughable. Two stamped steel halves welded together, a simple bolt inside, and a telescoping wire stock. No machining, no fine wood grip, no polish, just efficiency. When Hyde first shows it to the army inspectors, they stare in silence. One finally speaks. "What is this? A plumber's nightmare?" "No," Hyde replies. "A soldier's friend." They reject it immediately. The gun looks cheap, almost primitive, but Hyde doesn't stop. Night after night, he refines the welds, rebalances the weight, simplifies the spring mechanism. He builds it for the hands of a farm boy, not an engineer, a weapon that can be dropped in mud, rinsed, and fired again. By the end of the week, he scribbles a name across his blueprints. M3 submachine gun. His colleagues laugh. The army wants craftsmanship, not tin toys. Hyde just smirks. They'll want speed soon enough. Outside, the Detroit night glows orange from the furnaces of Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, the arsenal of democracy in full swing. America's factories are churning out tanks and bombers by the hour. Somewhere between the roar of the presses and the hiss of Hyde's torch, an idea is taking shape. An idea that will change how wars are armed. In the shadows of a noisy workshop, the mad welder keeps building. May 1942 Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. The air smells of cordite and cut grass. On the firing range, an array of gleaming weapons rests neatly on a long wooden table. Thompsons, Stens, M1 carbines. And at the far end, one ugly duckling. George Hyde stands beside his creation, hands stained black with grease, sleeves rolled up. His gun looks nothing like the polished arms around it. Its receiver is rough, its barrel unblued, its stock nothing but a pair of bent steel rods. The Ordnance Board officials look unimpressed. One mutters, "Looks like something built in a garage." Hyde nods. It was. They test it anyway. An officer shoulders the gun awkwardly, aims down range, and fires. The weapon rattles like a loose pipe, spitting brass casings across the gravel. The rounds hit the target in a tight cluster, no jams, no misfires. The officer lowers it, surprised. "It works." Another replies, "Sure, but no soldier's gonna trust that thing." The final report is blunt, lacks refinement, poor aesthetic, recommend rejection. Hyde takes the verdict silently. As the men walk away, one turns back. "Mr. Hyde, this army wants weapons, not welding projects." He almost laughs. "That's exactly what I'm building, Colonel, a weapon that wins wars, not parades." He packs up the prototype and drives back to Detroit. On the road, passing convoys of tanks and trucks, he replays the day in his head. They don't understand, he thinks. The army wants craftsmanship, but war wants numbers. In his notebook, he scribbles calculations. Time to machine a Thompson receiver 150 minutes, time to weld his 15. 1/10 the labor, 1/20th the cost, and every soldier who gets one means another man armed at the front. By the time Hyde reaches his workshop, the idea burns in him like fire. He strips the prototype down again, grinding, cutting, and welding until sparks fill the room. He redesigns the magazine well, replaces the barrel threads with a quick-fit system, and simplifies the bolt until it can be made on an automotive press. The next morning, he holds up the finished gun. It's uglier than before, but lighter, faster, and cheaper. He writes a new note across the top of the blueprints. M3 Simplified Production Model. Across town, the Inland Division of General Motors has begun quietly experimenting with Hyde's concept. Word spreads among engineers a submachine gun made from scrap steel, assembled like a car part. The same week, America loses its first 1,000 men in Tunisia. The reports are grim, infantry outgunned, supply chains stretched. Hyde sends a second prototype to Washington with a simple message attached. You don't need a perfect gun. You need a gun that never stops coming. This time, the army listens. The Mad Welder's gun is coming back, and it's about to reshape how America fights a global war. Septembre 1942, Detroit, Michigan. The vast factory floor at General Motors' Inland Division hums like a living machine. Presses slam down with rhythmic thunder. Sparks burst in every direction. Rows of workers, most of them young women in overalls and bandanas, feed strips of steel into stamping machines. Out of them, flat gun parts fall like puzzle pieces. A supervisor shouts over the noise, "Next batch for Hyde's Model 3, keep 'em moving." George Hyde watches from a catwalk above. The sight takes his breath away. This isn't a gunsmith's workshop anymore, it's an assembly line. His design has gone from mockery to blueprint, and from blueprint to reality. Below him, a welder picks up two stamped halves, aligns them in a jig, and fuses them together in seconds. A barrel slides in, a bolt is inserted, a wire stock snapped into place. Within minutes, another completed M3 submachine gun is lifted from the line, dull grey, boxy, and utterly unlike anything that came before it. It looks like a grease gun, the kind used to oil machinery, and before long, that nickname sticks. The Army's procurement officer, Colonel R. Studler, visits the plant to see it for himself. He picks one up, weighing it in his hands. "Feels like a toy," he says. Hyde grins. "Try firing it." Ugh. They step into a small indoor range built in the corner of the plant. Studler pulls the trigger. The weapon chatters quietly, steady and smooth. No jams, no recoil kick. When the magazine empties, Hyde steps forward. $20 in steel, he says. 10 minutes to build, and she'll outlast a Thompson. The colonel lowers the weapon, nodding slowly. You just built the future, Mr. Hyde. Soon the production order is signed. 500,000 units. By winter, the M3 is shipping to every front: North Africa, the Pacific, and Europe. Crates marked submachine gun, Calipals 45, M3 roll out by the thousands. Soldiers opening them at depots stare in disbelief. Private Tom Rivers, 1st Infantry Division, writes in his journal, "Looks like a hunk of pipe. Sergeant says it'll jam in the mud. We'll see." A week later, in the muck of Tunisia, he changes his tune. Gun works fine. Doesn't mind sand. Easy to clean. Guess the Mad Welder knew what he was doing. As production ramps up, the ripple effect becomes enormous. Every M3 that rolls off the line saves hours of precision machining that would have gone into a Thompson. The War Department's reports are staggering: tens of thousands of man-hours freed up each week for other critical weapons. Aircraft parts, tank engines, artillery shells. An internal memo from Washington estimates the total impact by year's end. Projected labor savings exceed 50 million man-hours. George Hyde receives the memo while sitting in his cluttered office, still wearing his welding gloves. He doesn't smile. He just folds it carefully, tucks it into his notebook, and whispers, 50 million hours, for 50 million chances to win. The Army had called his creation a joke. The welders called it impossible. Now it was saving time, lives, and a war built on deadlines. The grease gun was no longer a reject. It was the workhorse of victory. March 1943, Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. The desert wind screams through the mountains, carrying sand like glass shards. The air stinks of diesel, cordite, and fear. Along a jagged ridge, a platoon of American infantry crouches in foxholes as German shells pound the valley below. Private Tom Rivers grips his new weapon, the dull grey M13 submachine gun, and prays it'll work. The sergeant, a veteran from North Africa, grumbles beside him. "Keep that thing clean, Rivers. Looks like a car part, not a gun. It's lighter than the Thompson, sir." "Yeah, and uglier too." Before they can say more, the ridge erupts in fire. German infantry surge forward, shadows against the smoke. Rivers squeezes the trigger. The M3 coughs in a steady rhythm. It's 45 rounds cutting through the dust like thunderclaps. No jams, no recoil. The magazine empties in seconds, but every shot lands. When the smoke clears, the sergeant stares at the twisted metal bodies scattered below. "That thing," he mutters, "ain't pretty, but damn, it works." Word spreads fast. Soldiers start swapping their heavy Thompsons for the lighter, simpler grease guns. It fires slower, about 450 rounds per minute, but that means greater control, less wasted ammo. It's quiet, reliable, easy to fix in the field. If it breaks, a wrench and wire will do. In Italy, paratroopers carry it through mountain passes. In New Guinea, jungle fighters use it in rain so thick it kills other guns. The M3 doesn't rust. It doesn't jam. It just keeps firing. Some soldiers even joke that if you run out of ammo, you can beat the enemy with it. The gun is that solid. Back in Detroit, George Hyde receives letters from the front. "Sir," one soldier writes, "your gun saved my life in Sicily. Dropped it in a river, dried it with a rag, still fired perfect." Hyde hangs the letter on the wall beside his workbench. Around it are dozens of blueprints, each scribbled with grease and pencil marks. He never built it to be beautiful, only to survive. Meanwhile, the numbers explode. By late 1943, production of the M3 hits 100,000 units. Factories no longer need skilled machinists. High school graduates and housewives can assemble the guns with nothing but welders, jigs, and simple gauges. Every gun means hours saved for the war effort. Every saved hour means another ship, another tank, another chance to win faster. The army's view shifts from mockery to obsession. One general calls it the rifle of industry. Another writes, "This weapon symbolizes the American war machine, rough, fast, and relentless." As Allied lines advance through Africa and Italy, so does Hyde's invention. The M3 becomes a fixture in every transport, tank, and trench, a symbol of function over form. In London, a war correspondent writes of the new weapon. "It looks like it came from a junkyard, yet it works better than anything built in a palace." What the mad welder's idea is now on every front, in every hand, and in every victory bulletin. And for the first time, George Hyde realizes that what he built wasn't just a gun. It was proof that simplicity could be the most powerful weapon of all. August 1943, Inland Division Plant, Dayton, Ohio. The summer heat turns the factory into a furnace. Sparks flash like lightning beneath the rafters. The air vibrates with the rhythm of industry hammers, welders, stamping presses, riveters, all thundering in perfect sync. Rows of women in goggles and gloves feed stamped steel parts into the machines. Each motion is practiced, automatic. One woman, Eleanor Briggs, wipes her brow, lifts a receiver half, and slides it into a jig. A single spark, one weld, a hiss, and the gun is born. "Next!" someone shouts, and another piece slides down the line. Supervisors track the output on chalkboards. 500 per shift, 600, 700. The numbers rise every week. A single factory can now produce more weapons than the entire Springfield Armory once managed in a year. George Hyde walks the line with a clipboard in hand, his boots echoing on the concrete. He stops beside Eleanor and watches her weld. "Clean work," he says, his voice almost drowned by the machines. She looks up. "Didn't think I'd ever build a gun." Hyde grins. Didn't think I'd ever build one that didn't need a gunsmith. By fall, production expands to 5 plants nationwide. Every morning, trains depart loaded with wooden crates stenciled M3 submachine gun US. Army. They go east to New York, west to San Francisco, south to New Orleans, and from there to every front. The Thompson, once the icon of American firepower, is now a luxury. Commanders order them replaced in bulk. Hyde's creation costs 1/10 the price, weighs less, and takes a fraction of the time to make. An internal War Department report estimates the savings. Nearly 50 million man-hours by the end of 1944, enough labor to build 1,000 bombers or train 2 million soldiers. In Washington, a procurement officer puts it simply, Hyde didn't just give us a new gun, he gave us time, and time is victory. Photographs from the factory floors begin circulating in newspapers. Rows of women holding freshly welded M3s, smiling beneath banners that read, "Every gun a blow against the Axis." In one image, George Hyde stands among them, welding mask raised, his face smudged with soot. Beneath it, the caption reads, Engineer George Hyde with his design, the M3 grease gun, now in mass production. Back home, people finally start to understand that the war isn't just being fought overseas. It's being won right here in the roar of the forges, the hum of conveyor belts, and the sparks flying off 1,000 welding torches. Hyde returns to his desk late that night. He looks out over the factory floor, a sea of glowing metal and tireless hands. His invention no longer belongs to him, it belongs to the workers, the soldiers, the entire machinery of democracy in motion. He opens his notebook and writes one line. The simplest weapon for the hardest war. Outside, the whistle blows. The night shift begins. The sparks rise again. And somewhere far across the ocean, another American soldier uncrates a grease gun, wipes the oil from its steel, and whispers the same word every man does when he first holds it. Ugly. He racks the bolt. But perfect. November 1940, Tres Montfaucon, Lorraine sector, France. The morning light is thin and cold. Frost crystals cling to spent shell casings in the mud. A small patrol of infantry moves cautiously along a hedgerow, boots sinking, rifles ready. Private Tom Rivers walks near the rear, his M3 grease gun cradled against his chest. The weapon is dull grey, barely more than bent pipe and welded seams, but in Rivers' hands it feels like an extension of himself. They clear a farmhouse and move through a collapsed orchard. Ahead, enemy movement, a German patrol crossing a lane. The sergeant signals. Rivers steps forward, thumbs off the safety, and squeezes the trigger. The M3 talks in short, controlled bursts, its 45 rounds punching through smoke and timber. The enemy breaks and runs. The squad secures the lane with minimal fuss. Afterward, in the dim light of a field tent, Rivers cleans his gun with practiced motions. He lays out the simple parts bolt, spring, tube, and replaces them in minutes. Around him, other soldiers trade stories. A paratrooper who dropped into Sicily with nothing but a grease gun and a lucky sling. A tanker who used one to clear a roadblock and lived to tell it. The grease gun's battlefield virtues are plain. It's light enough for long patrols. Its slow cyclic rate, about 450 rounds per minute, actually conserves ammunition, letting soldiers fire controlled bursts that matter. It's forgiving in mud, sand, and rain. When a Thompson would choke and need a bench armorer, an M3 could be fixed roadside with a wrench and a rag. But beyond anecdotes, the strategic effects are enormous and quiet. Each M3 that pours off the lines of Detroit and Dayton replaces a Thompson that would have required hours of skilled machining. That time, those man-hours frees up factories to churn out engines, aviation parts, and shells. In staff rooms in Washington, procurement analysts update their models and blink at the numbers. Millions of labor hours reclaimed, meaning faster delivery of tanks, more aircraft servicing, more shipments sailing for the front. The grease gun becomes not just a weapon, but a force multiplier for production itself. At a forward logistic depot, Major Samuel Hayes, late of Ordnance, watches convoys roll by with crates marked M3. He walks the stacks and counts serial numbers, then writes in his log, one simplified design, one simplified supply chain. Multiply that across theatres. And you don't just save time, you change the tempo of the war. Letters from the front keep arriving at Hyde's plant. A medic writes that an M3 stopped a raid on his aid station. A glider pilot sends a sketch, the gun slung across a shoulder like a comrade. Each letter is pinned to the bulletin board in Hyde's office, testament to 1,000 small rescues and hundreds of patrols extended by a lighter load. Meanwhile, commanders begin to change tactics around the weapon's reality. Airborne divisions plan jump loads with the M3 as a primary close-quarters arm. Armoured infantry adjust stowage because the gun's compact form fits a tank bustle. Raiding parties favour the grease gun for its low flash and ease of reloading under fire. Doctrine follows equipment, and doctrine spreads fast. In an unnamed war room, a logistics officer tallies manpower charts. He cross-references machining hours saved with throughput increases and, with a blunt pen, marks the result. 50 million man-hours reallocated. The figure is almost abstract, a category of time converted into bullets, engines, and trucks. Yet out in the mud and jungle, those hours translate into something concrete. More men arriving on time, more supplies reaching hungry columns, fewer backlogs at docks and railheads. Not everyone loves the M3. Veteran NCOs still swear by the Thompson's feel in the shoulder. Some officers grumble about appearance, but the troops who count on something getting them home prefer function over form. In a quiet moment by a field stove, Rivers tells his sergeant, "Give me 10 of these and 2 hours of sleep, and I'll hold this sector all night." The sergeant pats the gun and nods. "Then we'll keep 'em out." Above the din of battle, the factories keep humming. Women at the jigs, teenagers at the presses, retired machinists brought back for the cause, their hands shape metal into a tool of survival. Each completed M3 carries one more patrol farther, one more convoy up, one more radar set installed. The sum of those small things is enormous. Men kept out of the hospital, engines finished on schedule, and a strategic tempo that keeps the enemy off balance. And George Hyde? He keeps welding. He walks the line sometimes, watches a finished receiver drop into a crate, and thinks of the soldiers he'll never meet who'll live because of a simplified bolt or a shorter machining run. He isn't a hero in speeches. He's a nod in a logistics memo, a signature on a procurement order, a greased thumbprint on the history of industrial warfare. In the trenches, soldiers don't measure time in bureaucratic hours. They count in patrols, in rations, in the number of times they can move without resupply. But behind every extra patrol, behind every convoy that arrives more quickly, is a factory that saved hours through a welded seam. The rejected gun was never meant to be glorious. It was meant to be effective. And in the end, effectiveness, not elegance, saved lives and accelerated victory. June 1944, Normandie, France. The beaches are chaos. Smoke drifts low over the wreckage of landing craft and half-buried tanks. Sand mixes with blood and seaweed. In the din of artillery and shouted orders, soldiers scramble inland through the hedgerows of northern France, and among them, slung across muddy shoulders, are hundreds of M3 grease guns. Private Tom Rivers, now a squad leader with the 1st Infantry Division, crouches behind a stone wall outside Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer. He wipes grime from the receiver of his M3 with the edge of his sleeve. The weapon is scarred, dented, and caked with salt, but it still cycles clean when he racks the bolt. "Still running?" a corporal asks. Rivers grins. "Like a tractor." When the Germans counterattack from the next field, the squad opens up. Thompsons roar, M1 rifles crack, and Rivers' M3 coughs steadily, spitting fire through the hedgerow. The 45 rounds punch through brush and bodies alike. The grease gun's quiet, low rate of fire makes it easier to conserve ammunition in the thick of the fight. By day's end, Rivers' men still hold the wall. The M3 has jammed once, quickly cleared with a simple tap on the receiver cover. He scratches a notch into its stock plate and mutters, That's 2 times this thing saved my hide. Across France, other units are learning the same lesson. Airborne troops who dropped behind German lines on D-Day praise the gun's compactness short enough to draw in a cramped glider or parachute harness. Tank crews, often trapped inside metal coffins, love its stubby frame easy to aim through a hatch. Paratrooper Sergeant Bill Redmond writes home, "You can crawl with it, drop with it, dunk it in a ditch, it still fires." In London, a war correspondent visits an ordnance depot and reports, "The weapon the army first laughed at is now the one most soldiers trust in the mud." General Omar Bradley, reviewing units along the front, asks a young corporal what he thinks of it. The man shrugs. "It's ugly, sir, but it kills Germans." The grease gun's reputation spreads not through propaganda, but through word of mouth. Soldiers trade them, scavenge them, weld field repairs onto broken stocks. One British commando reportedly paints his with camouflage and names it Maggie, claiming it saved his life in Caen. Back home, Hyde receives news of D-Day over the radio in his workshop. He doesn't cheer. He just sits back and listens, hands folded, while a journalist describes the chaos of Normandy. Then he turns off the radio and goes back to work, welding another set of receiver halves for an improved model, the M13A1, even simpler than before, no cocking handle, faster disassembly, fewer parts to jam. He doesn't know it yet, but this refined version will stay in service for decades through Korea, Vietnam, even into the Cold War. Meanwhile, the Army's post-invasion reports list an astonishing number. By mid-1944, more than 600,000 grease guns are in circulation. The savings are monumental, over 50 million man-hours redirected to other weapons, vehicles, and logistics. The ripple of that efficiency touches every corner of the war effort. On the front lines, soldiers joke that their ugly little gun has a bigger impact than they'll ever know. In the months to come, the M3's distinct chatter will echo through the fields of France, the forests of Belgium, and the ruins of Germany. Everywhere it goes, it proves the same truth. Brilliance isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it's welded from scrap steel, built by factory girls, and held together by stubbornness and grease. May 1945 Munich, Germany. The war is over. The guns have gone silent. Across Europe, weary soldiers march through the rubble of cities that once defied them. They carry duffel bags, memories, and for many, slung across a shoulder or tucked under an arm, the same grey, beaten piece of stamped steel that got them here, the M3 grease gun. Private Tom Rivers, older and gaunter than the man who landed in Normandy, stands outside a ruined farmhouse with his squad. He inspects his weapon one last time. The paint is scraped away, the barrel scored from heat, but the bolt still runs smooth. He wipes it down, then sets it aside. "Guess we both made it," he murmurs. Half a world away, in a quiet office in Detroit, George Hyde reads a telegram from the War Department. It's short, almost clinical. "Congratulations. M3 submachine gun officially credited with saving over 50 million man-hours in production. Weapon now standard issue across all US branches." Look. He sets the paper down, looks around the workshop where it all began, the same cluttered benches, the same old torch. Sparks from nearby welding stations dance across the floor like echoes of the past 3 years. Visitors sometimes expect to find Hyde triumphant, but he remains humble. "It was never about the gun," he tells a journalist who's come to interview him. "It was about building something soldiers could count on, and something factories could build fast enough to save them." When? In an army depot in Le Havre, engineers stack crates of surplus Thompsons and M3S side by side. The contrast says everything about the evolution of modern war. One a masterpiece of craftsmanship, the other a masterpiece of simplicity. The grease gun costs a fraction, takes minutes to assemble, and does the same deadly job. The war's logistics officers will later call it a strategic miracle. Every hour saved by its design became a truck rolling sooner, a plane repaired faster, a soldier supplied in time. It proved that innovation isn't only found in laboratories or command rooms. Sometimes it's born in the sparks of a welder's torch. in the mind of a man mad enough to strip a weapon down to its essence. Years later, in Korea and Vietnam, new generations of soldiers will still carry it, the M3A1, Hyde's refined model, greased, ugly, and dependable as ever. Mechanics, tankers, and paratroopers will call it old reliable. Some will even pass them down through units, the same weapons forged during the Second World War still firing without fail. And back in Detroit, long after the last shift whistle blows and the wartime factories go quiet, the memory of that industrial rhythm lingers, the clang of presses, the hiss of welders, the heartbeat of a nation that armed itself not with glamour, but with grit. George Hyde retires without fanfare. In his small home workshop, one battered prototype still hangs on the wall, its surface blackened and warped from early tests. He keeps it there as a reminder of rejection, persistence, and the beauty of function. When asked in his final interview what he thought of his invention, he smiled faintly and said, "They called it ugly. I called it necessary. The world would remember it as both. Because when the smoke cleared, the weapon that saved 50 million man-hours had also saved something far greater, countless lives." The mad welder's rejected gun became one of the quiet heroes of World War II, a machine built not for glory, but for victory.